Hello, my name is David Lankus, and thank you so much for your interest in the Atlas for New Librarianship. I'm so thrilled to have the Italian version of this available, and thank Anna Maria and Enrico for doing the translation, which with my English could not have been easy. It really is my attempt to forward the conversation about librarianship, to see where it's going. And the Atlas itself is based around its mission, that the mission of librarians, not libraries, not institutions, not governments, but of librarians, of professionals, of individuals, is to improve society. How do we improve society? Through facilitating knowledge creation within our communities. Our role is not to house knowledge, to store knowledge, to shelve knowledge, to preserve knowledge. You can't do that. Knowledge is uniquely human. It's in our head. But to facilitate people developing their own knowledge through books, materials, tools, buildings, databases, what have you. But to understand those are just tools. The bottom line of the Atlas is that bad libraries build collections. Good libraries build services, of which the collection is one. But great libraries build communities. That communities are our true collections. That whatever we make available, the space, the books, the materials, the databases, websites, what have you, they're just tools to lead to a better day. And that's why one of the great aspirations of my work and through the Atlas is to develop librarians as radical, positive change agents. That what we seek to do is not create a set of professions and professionals that sit on the side and wait to help, but that are actively out in the community seeking out what their dreams and aspirations and problems are, and then to push those ahead. At the core of the Atlas is a very simple question. It's a rather large tome, but it's a really simple question. Can we define what it means to be a librarian without a reference to the building? In other words, a lot of times when we look at librarians and librarianship, we define it in relation to the institution of library. That this institution has collections of materials and services and programs, and we staff them with these people called librarians. I wanted to turn that around and say, can we define librarianship without reference to those things? Is there something that's core to what we do that may happen in an institution called a library or a building called a library, but may happen in the street and online and in corporations and in businesses and all over the world? And so that's what the attempt of the Atlas is. And it comes down to three things. One, that mission. Two, our view of knowledge, that knowledge is uniquely human and therefore we're in the learning process, that librarians are all about learning and teaching and knowing. And lastly, a set of core principles and values that are developed over our 3,000-year history about openness and transparency and intellectual honesty and safety. And that represents what a librarian is, and then librarians then create institutions and buildings and such called libraries. That an empty room, or that a room full of books and materials is a closet, but that an empty room with a librarian in it is a library. So a lot of that Atlas is about giving you the foundation behind that. Now Enrico's asked me to respond to a few questions, which I will do quickly, and then I'll let you get on with your day. The first question, the Atlas came out in 2011. Now 3 years have passed. What reception did it have both in public and in academic libraries? Generally, I've had a very, very positive reaction. What we found is that there were a lot of librarians that were working in libraries and elsewhere that felt discontent with simply a focus on collection and a focus on institution, and suddenly they were hearing that, no, it's not about the stuff. It's not about the books and buildings and databases and ebooks. It's about the people. It's about the community. It's about action and being active. It's that looking at librarianship as a way of changing the world. And that's been a very positive result because a lot of folks who become librarians, at least in the States, but I've seen it all over the world from China to Sweden to the US to Germany to Italy. They became librarians not so they could caretake. They became librarians not so they could take care of a building or they could buy materials or what have you. They became librarians because they wanted to make a difference. And the Atlas says that's what your role is. And so it's been very positive both in academic and public libraries. Public libraries have used it as part of the entryway into maker spaces, in the idea of active services, in building new online conversations and sites. You see it in places like Chattanooga, Tennessee Public Library. You see it in action, while maybe not inspired by the Atlas, certainly in line with the Atlas, in the Delft Public Library system. So you see it around the world. In academic libraries, they certainly have been taking to it, looking at their role as reference librarians, as educators now, looking at teaching sessions and not simply providing them out. Now, that said, there have been sort of a couple of areas of resistance where people have legitimately said, wait, I don't buy this. And as the Atlas and my work through the Atlas is about conversation, I love the fact that we're starting a dialogue deeper around librarianship than simply what we do and how we do it. So there have been people from the philosophy and humanities area that have taken a sort of critical approach to my approach to learning as constructed and uniquely human, and everyone constructing it. You've seen that there have been some people who look at the role of the librarian as a much more passive, sort of servant-oriented profession, where they should do what they're told because they get taxpayers. So you've seen some resistance to it, but by and large it's been very positive across all library types, and looking at being proactive, looking at being community-centered. You see this being adopted by the American Library Association in their outlooks, and in the notion of community focus and transforming communities. You see this in the Salzburg curriculum, where they look at the role of a library and museum professional as communications and culture, and keeping a culture alive in a local culture. So it's had pretty wide-scale adoption. We've had to do several reprints of the run, which makes me happy, makes my publisher very happy. And you see the Italian version. There's a Chinese version going out. And so internationally, it's gotten me invites to come and speak in Sweden and some beautiful places. So I'm very thrilled with that. Second question. The Atlas is about conversation. What place does it take in the global conversation about libraries? How does it connect to the previous library literature and new threads on the topics that it's launched? Well, it certainly tries to build on the existing literature. It really does try and take into account a lot of different approaches from theory. One of the things that the Atlas seeks to do is to ground librarianship in deeper thought than simply what it is we do. It really seeks to go to why we do it. Why we build systems, how we can build systems based on how people think, and not simply how our collections are organized. So it seeks to build on that global conversation and enhance that global conversation and move it ahead. One of the great things about librarianship is that it has an over 3,000-year history. And professions that have been around that long, medicine and such, haven't been around for 3,000 years because they haven't changed. They've been around for 3,000 years because they change constantly. Farmers don't farm like they did 3,000 years ago. Doctors, thank goodness, don't treat like they did 3,000 years ago. And librarians shouldn't look at their role as the big library with stuff in it, and we've just moved from scrolls to books. They've changed. The way that a profession honors its past in a living profession is not simply to adopt it, but to recognize it, take what works best in the present context, and innovate on top of it. And so that's what new librarianship is all about, taking what we know that works and building on top of it and looking forward. It's certainly been widely adopted by folks who are looking to get out of the notion of what's our stuff or where is our future. If you look at the discussions about the future of librarianship, they're almost always about ebooks and materials and licensing. And they're important conversations. But they're conversations about our tools and not our fundamental being. We really are looking at how we can continue the conversation. So we now have an Italian version. And what's interesting is one of my favorite quotes when I was over in Italy and I was talking to the then director of the Italian Library Association. And he said the difference between American libraries and Italian public libraries is that in Italy, if you're looking for a recipe for sauce, you ask your mother, you don't get a cookbook. And what struck me is that actually is still librarianship. Getting in touch and getting those experts, whether it's your mother at sauce or whether it's an expert in medicine or what have you, and beginning a community conversation. Yes, documenting it. Yes, bringing materials from outside of the community to help it. But at the center is that conversation. So once again, I want to thank Enrico for giving me this opportunity. I want to thank you for taking the time. And I really want to hear from you. I'm on Twitter. I'm on email. If you send it to me in Italian, the best decision I ever made in my life was marrying an Italian who can actually translate it for me. I want to thank you, and I want to welcome you into this conversation. The point is not to agree with what's in that book. The point is to think about and then come up with your own vision, your own view to build your own knowledge. Thank you very much.